Cameron Hayes had everything a man could want. He was at the peak of his career as a highly successful architect, living in a luxurious downtown apartment, and surrounded by friends and colleagues who admired him. But there was one thing that made everything complete: his wife, Olivia. They had been married for 8 years, and Cameron thought their bond was unbreakable. They had met in college, where Olivia was a vibrant, passionate art student. They fell in love instantly. Over time, their relationship grew, cemented in shared dreams and a mutual understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses. Their lives together had always been filled with laughter, love, and stability. To the world, they were the perfect couple. But what Cameron didn't know was that perfection had a fragile side, and things were about to come crashing down. One rainy evening, Cameron returned early from a business trip, eager to surprise Olivia with a quiet dinner at home. He had spent days on a design project that could propel his career even further, and he couldn't wait to tell Olivia. As he entered the apartment, however, something was off. The normally warm and welcoming space felt cold. The lights were dim, and the smell of fresh flowers, which Olivia loved, was absent. There was no sound of the TV, no cooking, no music. Only silence. "Olivia?" Cameron called, his voice echoing off the empty walls. He waited for a response, but there was none. A sense of unease crept into his chest. Something wasn't right. The house was too quiet, and the absence of Olivia's usual presence made him uneasy. Cameron walked through the apartment, his footsteps echoing with each movement. As he turned a corner, he was stunned to see her sitting on the couch, her face a mixture of sorrow and guilt, her hands trembling as she clutched a glass of wine. Cameron's heart skipped a beat. There was no welcoming smile, no rush to embrace him. Just a painful silence. He immediately sensed something was wrong, something bigger than a missed dinner or a bad day. "Olivia, what's going on?" he asked, his voice strained with concern. "Why didn't you answer me?" Olivia looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "Cameron, I've made a terrible mistake. I need to tell you something." The weight of her words hit Cameron like a ton of bricks. His stomach twisted, and he braced himself for something he wasn't prepared for. There was a long pause before Olivia finally spoke again, and when she did, her voice trembled. "I've been seeing someone else," she confessed, her eyes welling with tears. "I never meant for this to happen, but it did. I'm so sorry." Cameron stood frozen in place, unable to move or speak. "Someone else?" His mind was racing, his heart pounding in his chest. The world around him began to fade as he processed her words. Olivia, the woman he trusted with everything, had betrayed him. How long had this been going on? Who was this person? Why? The questions swirled around him, drowning out everything else. He could barely breathe, let alone think. He had known Olivia for years. She was his partner, his confidant, the woman he had shared everything with. How could she do this to him? Who is he? Cameron managed to whisper, his voice barely audible. Olivia's hands trembled as she wiped away a tear. "His name is James. He's someone I met a few months ago." It started out innocently enough, just talking, but it turned into something more. "I was confused, Cameron. I didn't know how to stop. I made terrible choices, and now everything's ruined. I'm so sorry." Cameron's mind was in a whirlwind. James? The name meant nothing to him. But what hurt more than the name was the realization that Olivia, his Olivia, had kept this secret from him for months. She had been carrying on an affair while he was away on business trips, building a life with someone else while he thought they were happy. "How could you do this?" Cameron's voice was filled with a mix of anger and disbelief. "I trusted you. We had everything, Olivia. We had a future together. How could you betray me like this?" "I don't expect you to forgive me," Olivia whispered, her face full of shame. "But please, understand that this wasn't about you. It wasn't because I didn't love you. I don't know how to explain it, but I lost myself. I was so caught up in the excitement, the newness of it all. And now, I've ruined everything. Cameron's hands shook as he stood there, staring at her. Every fiber of his being wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand answers. But instead, he just stood there, watching her fall apart. It wasn't just about the affair, it was the destruction of everything he believed in. How could she do this? "I need you to leave," Cameron said, his voice cold and distant, a far cry from the warmth it used to carry. "I need space. I can't look at you right now." Olivia nodded, tears flowing freely now. "I understand. I'll go." She walked past him without another word, her body hunched in sorrow, the weight of her guilt visible in every step she took. Cameron watched her go, feeling an emptiness in his chest that he couldn't explain. He had just lost the woman he loved, and with her, he felt like he was losing a part of himself. The days that followed were a blur of pain, anger, and confusion. Cameron couldn't escape the image of Olivia's tear-streaked face, her hollow apology, and the betrayal that had shattered their lives. He couldn't bring himself to face her or even talk to her. The woman he had shared his dreams with, the one he had trusted beyond measure, was now a stranger. But as the shock began to wear off, a different kind of emotion took over: resentment. Cameron began to question everything. The late nights he worked late, the weekends he spent away on business, the times he thought Olivia was simply preoccupied with her art. Had she been seeing James all along? Had their entire relationship been a facade? The hurt turned into a simmering anger. Olivia had broken him, and yet, she was the one walking away with an explanation, leaving him to pick up the pieces of his shattered heart. It wasn't until a few weeks later that Cameron found himself at a crossroads. One night, after weeks of avoiding Olivia's calls, he finally agreed to meet her. They met at a small cafe, far from their usual haunts, the place where they had once shared countless conversations over coffee and pastries. Cameron sat across from her, his expression hard but conflicted. Olivia had changed, she looked more fragile than he had ever seen her, her eyes filled with regret and remorse. But Cameron wasn't sure if he could forgive her, not yet. "I don't expect things to go back to normal," Olivia began, her voice small. "I know what I've done. And I know I can never undo it. But I want you to know I'm sorry, Cameron. I never meant to hurt you. I've learned so much about myself, and I realize how wrong I was. I'll never forgive myself for what I've done." Cameron looked at her, the anger slowly turning into a quiet sorrow. The damage had been done, but he had never imagined that it would feel like this. The pain wasn't just from the affair, it was from the years they had spent together, only to end up like this. He didn't know if he could ever trust her again, but one thing was clear: he couldn't stay in this emotional limbo forever. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Olivia," Cameron admitted. "I don't know if I can trust you again. But I do know this: I need to heal. I need to move forward, whether that's with or without you. And you need to do the same." Olivia nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I understand. And I will. But please, just know that I love you. I always have." In the months that followed, Cameron began to rebuild his life, piece by piece. He threw himself into his work, rediscovered his passions, and took the time to focus on himself. He forgave Olivia, not for her, but for his own peace of mind. The bitterness slowly faded, replaced by the understanding that people make mistakes, but they also grow from them. And Olivia, too, worked hard to make amends. She focused on her own personal growth, realizing how much she had taken for granted and how important it was to never let complacency drive a wedge between two people who loved each other. Though their paths diverged after the affair, both Cameron and Olivia found healing in their own way. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was one that allowed them both to move forward and rediscover who they were outside of their relationship. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more real stories of love, loss, and personal growth. Your voice matters, and we'd love to have you join our community. Until next time, remember, sometimes, the hardest lessons come from the toughest moments. It's not about how we fall, but how we rise from the ashes. Life is messy, and love is complicated, but both are worth fighting for.